It's the grim spectre of Jack the Ripper that haunts these mean streets, the haunting mystery of one of history's most notorious serial killers. With a body count of at least 5 and possibly many more, his reign of terror shocked Victorian London to its core. But despite the gruesome details and shocking nature of his crimes, the killer was never caught. So what really happened? Welcome back to the channel. And today we look at the unsolved murders of Jack the Ripper. But before we begin our chilling tale, please subscribe. Join our growing community of history lovers and be the first to learn when new videos are released. Thank you. Now let's go back to Victorian London. Imagine yourself strolling down the fog-laden streets of London in the year 1888. Gas lamps illuminate the way, casting long shadows that dance in the mist. The air is thick with the smell of coal smoke and stale waste. You find yourself in Whitechapel, one of London's poorest districts. Poverty-stricken residents huddle in dimly lit rooms, trying to escape the cold East End. The year is 1888, and Whitechapel is about to become infamous for all the wrong reasons. On the evening of August 31st, 1888, Mary Ann Nichols, a 43-year-old woman, stumbles out of a pub on Bucks Row. She is staggering drunk. As she makes her way through the dark, narrow alleys, a figure emerges from the fog. His face is obscured by the darkness. All you can make out is the glint of a knife in his hand. He lunges. Mary falls to the ground, blood staining the cobblestones. Her killer flees into the mist. When dawn breaks, the horrific details emerge. Mary's throat has been slit from ear to ear, her body mutilated beyond recognition. Fear grips Whitechapel. Rumors spread like wildfire, and soon the killer is given a name, Jack the Ripper. Over the next few months, he will strike again and again, each time leaving behind a trail of blood and terror. We know now that there were actually 8 confirmed victims of Jack the Ripper. However, some historians argue that the actual number could be much higher. There were many mutilated bodies found during the time period that were likely Jack's work, but the evidence was not strong enough to confirm it. Also, this map shows where each victim was killed, giving us an idea of the area that Jack frequented. Let's get started. Mary Ann Nichols was born in 1845 and grew up in poverty. She had 4 children and spent her days doing menial jobs and drinking heavily in local pubs. On the night of August 31st, 1888, she left a pub called the Six Bells and was walking along Bucks Row when she was attacked. Her throat was cut and she was left to bleed out on the pavement. The second victim was Elizabeth Stride, a 44-year-old woman who had a history of mental illness. She was found dead on the morning of September 30th, 1888, having been slashed across the throat. Her killer was believed to be Jack the Ripper. Interestingly, Elizabeth survived the attack for some time and even managed to walk a short distance to a doctor's house before collapsing. Next, there was Catherine Eddowes, a 46-year-old alcoholic. She was found brutally murdered on September 30th, 1888. Her throat was cut and her abdomen was ripped open. This was the 3rd and 4th attacks to occur within just hours of one another. This led to widespread panic in the city, but Jack would strike again. The 5th victim was Mary Jane Kelly, a 25-year-old prostitute who had worked in various music halls. She was found dead in her room on November 9th, 1888. The brutality of her murder was extreme. Her throat was cut, her chest was ripped open, and many of her internal organs were removed. This was the final murder attributed to Jack the Ripper, although there were likely more. Jack's motives remain unknown, adding to the enigma surrounding his identity. Some believe he was a doctor, possibly fascinated by the female anatomy, hence the post-mortem mutilations. Others suggest he derived sexual gratification from the killings. Whatever his motivation, Jack operated with impunity, evading capture despite the massive manhunt. Police investigations were hampered by several factors. First, The sheer poverty and overcrowding in Whitechapel meant that witnesses were often reluctant to come forward or were simply too frightened to help the police. Additionally, the fog and darkness that shrouded the city at night provided the perfect cover for Jack to strike and escape. Finally, the limited forensic technology of the time restricted the ability to link Jack to the crime scenes. Despite a massive manhunt, the killer remained at large. Over the years, hundreds of people have been identified as potential suspects. One prominent theory suggests that Jack the Ripper was Montague John Deuce, a Polish immigrant and serial killer who murdered women in both London and Paris. However, doubts remain over the strength of this evidence. Another theory points to Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant living in Whitechapel who exhibited signs of mental instability. A third suspect is Francis Tumblety, an American dentist visiting London in 1888. Some believe he confessed to the murders, but the confession was never proven authentic. What we do know is that Jack the Ripper became a media sensation in his day. Newspapers around the world ran stories on the horrific killings, some even publishing detailed descriptions of the crime scenes. The fear and fascination surrounding the case created a frenzy that continues to this day. So why has the case remained unsolved for so long? It can be attributed to several factors. Firstly, the darkness and fog that enveloped London at the time allowed Jack to operate with relative ease. Secondly, the lack of forensic technology limited the ability to link Jack to the crime scenes. Finally, the poverty and overcrowding in Whitechapel meant that witnesses were often reluctant to come forward. Some historians argue that the brutal nature of the murders, particularly the deep knowledge displayed of female anatomy, suggests a medical background for the killer. Could Jack the Ripper have been a doctor or a surgeon? Perhaps someone with anatomical knowledge who used his skills in the most sinister way imaginable. As the years passed, the pressure mounted on the police to catch Jack. Scotland Yard employed some of the brightest minds to work on the case, but to no avail. The manhunt became a race against time, but Jack seemed to be one step ahead. The legacy of Jack the Ripper lives on. In literature, film and art, his name has become synonymous with evil. But what if Jack the Ripper wasn't just a singular person? What if there were multiple killers who operated under the same moniker, striking fear into the hearts of Londoners? This may sound far-fetched, but some historians argue that the differences in the crime scenes and the brutality of the attacks suggest that more than one individual was responsible. In fact, one theory suggests that the murders were committed by a group of killers working together to create a reign of terror that would shock the nation. If true, this raises the question of why the group carried out such horrific acts and what their ultimate goal was. Could it be that the real Jack the Ripper isn't a man at all, but a woman? This may seem like a bold statement, but there are those who believe that a female killer, or perhaps a group of women, could have been responsible for the heinous crimes. At the time, women were largely confined to domestic roles, and any deviation from societal norms was met with severe criticism. Therefore, a female Jack the Ripper would have been a shocking development. But what if the restrictions placed upon women during the Victorian era drove them to extreme measures? Could it be that the brutal murders were the act of a woman scorned, or a desperate attempt to break free from the constraints of society? What if Jack the Ripper wasn't solely responsible for the killings and instead had accomplices who aided him in his gruesome endeavors? This may seem like a twist from the typical narrative, but the theory holds some weight. After all, the crimes were committed over a period of several months, which suggests that Jack may have needed help to carry out his horrific spree. Furthermore, the level of brutality and precision displayed in some of the murders indicates a level of experience and knowledge that one person alone may not have possessed. Could it be that Jack was part of a larger network of individuals driven by darkness and depravity? The mystery of Jack the Ripper remains unsolved to this day. His identity, motive, and even the exact number of his victims are still debated. But one thing is certain, his crimes shocked the world and left an indelible mark on history. In the end, we may never know the true story behind Jack the Ripper. The killer's motive, identity, and even the number of his victims may forever remain a mystery. But that doesn't mean we can't keep searching for answers. Maybe one day new evidence will surface, or a new theory will emerge that brings us closer to solving this gruesome puzzle. Until then, the legend of Jack the Ripper will continue to live on, serving as a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the human heart. Thank you for watching. What are your thoughts on the Jack the Ripper case? Do you think we'll ever know who he was? Let us know in the comments section below. Please remember to like and subscribe so you never miss an upload. And why not share your thoughts in a review? We love reading your feedback. Until next time, stay curious.